Hello everyone, this is Manju and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm bringing you a case from Japan. It's a murder case of a foreign English teacher. Now imagine, your friend is in Japan teaching English to students, loving life, learning about their culture, when one day her body is found in a bathtub on a balcony. Well, that's what happened to Lindsay Ann Hawker. Lindsay was originally from Coventry, England, born to Bill and Julie Hawker. She was a bright student throughout her life and graduated with honors in biology at the University of Leeds, and her goal was to pursue masters. But before going into the master's program, Lindsay wanted to take a year off, enjoy her life, and experience the world. She loved to travel and wanted to experience living in different countries and immerse herself into other cultures. So she signed up to teach English in one of Japan's most prestigious private English conversation schools at that time. She flew to Japan and started teaching in October 2006 at the Tokyo branch of NOVA. The program gave her an apartment, which she shared with two other female foreign teachers. She was loved among her peers and co-workers, and they described her as kind, loyal, hardworking, and reliant. Now, Lindsay was also very close with her parents. She always contacted them via email, Skype, or just plain called them multiple times a day. So when one day her parents didn't get a call from her or an email, they just got worried. At the same time, her co-workers realized that she had not come home for 2 days. They contacted her roommates, but again, the roommates even said, well, yeah, it's a little weird. We actually haven't seen her at home either. Now, she was the type of person to always be on time, always then let people know if she was going to be late coming home or late coming into work. She was a very responsible person. Now, the teaching institute didn't want to get into more hot water because she was a foreign teacher, so they reported her missing at 2:30 p.m. on March 26. Now, her boyfriend, who was in England, and her roommates were suspicious of one man, Ishihashi. Now, Lindsay had previously mentioned that she met a man who was Ishihashi on a train on her way home from work one day. And throughout that ride, he kept saying that she was his English teacher. And she kept saying no, like it wasn't possible because this is a grown man and she's teaching English to younger students. And when eventually she got off the train and unlocked her bike, she saw from her peripheral vision that he was still walking towards her, that he got off with her, that he was like just eyes locked on her, was following her. So she started biking and quickly noticed that his walk turned into running and he was running after her. She started biking faster, but he kept running after her. He chased her all the way home. Once she got to her apartment, she locked up her bike and eventually, of course, he did catch up to her. And then he started complaining how tired he was, how thirsty he was, and wanted a glass of water. Now, at this point of the story, people would think like, okay, why did you even bike home? Why didn't you go to like a crowded place or go to the police station and mention that there's a man chasing after you? But instead, she felt sorry for him because she knew he kind of chased her and he was thirsty. I'm sure he was thirsty. He was sweating. And now that they were at her apartment, as a precaution, she began to think, well, you know what? I want him to know that I'm not living alone, that I have roommates. So she invited him inside and she introduced him to her two roommates and gave him something to drink. Now, Ishihashi spent some time with them. He drew Lindsay's picture and signed it with his name, email, and phone number. And through this interaction, Lindsay started feeling comfortable with him. And she, being so kind as she is, she agreed with giving him a private English lesson. So they agreed to meet at a cafe 4 days later for their first lesson. Now, Sunday, March 25th rolled around, and then Monday, March 26th rolled around. And nothing. No word from Lindsay. Her parents did get worried, and they tried to contact the police themselves. But because of the language barrier, they kept getting connected to the wrong departments. Around the same time, the school themselves contacted the police because they knew that this was so unlike her and it's something serious, especially since she is a foreigner. Now, when the Teaching Institute contacted the police, they did not take it seriously. To them, she was a young adult and there were no signs of a struggle at the apartment, so it made no sense to investigate. The police thought that maybe she was just gonna go take a vacation. She's a grown adult. She probably had a little lover and she just wanted to like disappear in the world. Now, the roommates and the teaching institute kept saying, no, that's not like her. Like, we know who she is. She's not like that. We will have people to answer to. You need to take this case seriously. The school then contacted her parents, asking if they knew why she wasn't coming to work. Now, that is when the parents and the school finally talked, and the parents also mentioned, like, yes, that is weird. We also have not talked to our daughter. We tried talking to the police, but because of the language barrier, they kept transferring us to different departments. Like, we have not been able to get through. The school then went back to the police, and finally the police said, okay, fine, stop bugging us. We will look into this case. The police then went to her apartment, and the roommates then showed the police the picture that Ishihashi drew, and they told them about how Ishihashi, a couple days prior, was just running and chasing after her, forcing her to be his English teacher. The police took this drawing and were able to find his apartment, and around 9 officers arrived at Ishihashi's apartment, but get this, no one knocked. Nope. They were just kind of hoping that Ishihashi would magically come out of the door and would want to talk to them, would allow them to go in. They didn't have a warrant. They had said that with the amount of evidence that they have, with the amount of things that they have, a warrant will not get issued. So the most they can do is just walk around his apartment complex and just hope that they will bump into him. Japan has another rule that if everything is a speculation, you cannot even knock on the door. Police can't even knock on the door. So a few officers stood around outside of the apartment door, few were on his floor walking around, and some were even on the actual ground surrounding the complex, hoping that from somewhere, somehow, someone would bump into him. Eventually, Ishihashi came out of his apartment with a backpack and started talking to the officers that were on the floor. Now, the conversation wasn't anything like suspicious. It was more like, do you know her? How do you know her? And then all of a sudden, mid-conversation, he runs. He bolts it down and he jumped from the 4th floor balcony. Now, you would think the officers would alert the other officers that were on the ground that, okay, he just jumped, he's coming your direction. But they didn't, because they didn't have any radios with them. They were so unprepared for this. Now, he ended up escaping from the police, and then the police started asking neighbors questions. And according to them, they did hear something like metal being dragged the day before. Now, they used this information to get a warrant and go into Ishihashi's apartment. Now, this is when they found scrape marks on the floor leading them to the balcony, where they found a bathtub filled with some type of fertilized soil and sand. Now, it was pretty compacted, but in one area, they saw a little bit of a hand peeking out. Now, they dug out the body and saw it was Lindsay. She was tied up in plastic ties, scarves, and had bruises all over her body. She was R-worded and strangled until the cartilage in her neck broke and her head was shaved. Now, later on, we find out that why did Ishihashi shave her head? And it was because he believed that hair wouldn't decompose. So that is why he shaved off her head and was just hoping that her body would just decompose in the soil and sand, like the compost soil that he had put in the bathtub. Now, eventually, the police did get an arrest warrant on suspicion of abandoning Lindsay's body, but couldn't find him. Now, where was Ishihashi? No one knew where he was. The police raided popular gay spots because they got several calls saying that he was spotted at gay bars, but no one found him. Months went by and no information. 20 officers were put on the case, but nothing. They even raided like love hotels, but nothing. Police went far enough to release pictures of him disguised as a woman and released images of his drawings, hoping someone would recognize the style, but nothing. At that point, some officers were even suggesting that maybe he committed suicide. Now, Lindsay's dad heard this and was furious. He believed the police were just saying this to close the case and move on. Now, media had stepped in and said that maybe he had fled to the Philippines. Now, 2 years have gone by. On the second anniversary of Ishihashi's disappearance, the police even made cardboard cutouts of Ishihashi to help jog people's memories. Few months later, the police then decided to raise the cash reward for any information leading to the arrest of Ishihashi from 1 million to 10 million. Now, this is what led to the arrest while he was trying to board a ferry to Okinawa. Now, Ishihashi did not confess anything once he was arrested, and when his 23-day period of detention without charge expired on December 2nd, he was charged with abandoning a body and served 2 more warrants for R-word and murder. Now, Ishihashi's lawyers came out and told the media that he was being threatened with the death penalty if he did not speak. And the reason why he was silent was because he was tired and he was stressed out. Now, a couple weeks later, on December 23rd, one of his lawyers came out and announced that yes, Ishihashi has announced and acknowledged that he was involved in Lindsay's death, that he accidentally killed her because when he was R-wording her, he didn't want her to scream. So accidentally, he killed her. Now, while on trial, Ishihashi went through the events of what actually happened. Now, going back, Lindsay and Ishihashi did meet up on the day that they had agreed upon in the cafe, and Lindsay did teach him English, okay? And now when it was time for her to go home, he said he forgot his money at home and how they should take a taxi to his apartment, and that is where he will give her the money. And Lindsay, she said, okay, fine, I don't see anything wrong with that, so she went. Now, once they reached his apartment, he convinced Lindsay to come upstairs with him to take the money, so he doesn't have to come down. Now, Lindsay told the taxi driver to wait for her and that she would be back in 5 minutes. Now, the taxi driver waited, but she never came down. Now, he thought that they had a change of plans, so he left. Now, upstairs, Ishihashi was suffocating Lindsay to prevent her from screaming, and then he put her in the bathtub, which he had already dragged onto the balcony. And he filled it up with dirt and this special type of mixture, which is used to speed up the decomposing process. After hearing all this, the district court sentenced Ishihashi to life imprisonment for the murder of Lindsay. Now, the Hawker family had requested the death penalty, but the court felt like the death penalty was inappropriate because Ishihashi had no previous convictions, and because at the age of 32, he still had a chance of rehabilitation. Now, why did it take so long for the police to arrest him? Now, police had mentioned that after his arrest, he did look different compared to the pictures that were released. But why? It's because Ishihashi underwent plastic surgery. Now, he didn't go to a doctor. No. He did it on himself. Years later, Ishihashi released a book about what he was going through while he was on the run. Ishihashi mentioned that the day of him fleeing his apartment, he bound up his nose with a thread and needle to make it narrower. He then tried twice to cut off part of his lower lip to make it thinner. First time he couldn't go through with it because it was too painful, but a few days later he did go to a public bathroom and he cut part of it off. I'm sure it would be noticeable for people to see a thread in his nose and these scars on his lips, but because it's pretty common in Japan to wear masks, which he was doing, he was wearing several layers of masks to hide the scars, he didn't stand out. And he also dug out his 2 moles that were on his face. So he tried his best to disfigure his face to evade the police. Now, at this moment, Ishihashi is serving out his sentence in Japan, and one day he can be a free man. That is it for today's case. Thank you for listening, and until next time, bye.